Hello YouTubers, it is me, Trollface the Man, and sorry if I sound a little bleh. My throat is currently sore, I'm a little bit sick right now, but luckily I can't spread germs through the internet. At least I'm pretty sure that's how it works, so you should probably be fine. Probably. But anyways, what I'm going to do today is show you how to take an image such as this and turn it into something you can use for like thumbnails. For example, I got an image from off of here. This is a Creative Commons image, which means it can be modified and redistributed without giving credit to the original author. And my modified version was used here to create this thumbnail. And you can see that this is now the modified version. And I'm pretty much just going to show you how to make something like that today. So I'll link this in the description below in case you want to get this exact image to work with. But basically we have a couple of different options here I can just click on, and each one has an option to download. This once again is from Wikimedia, which is a Creative Commons section of Wikipedia. So I'm just going to use the yellow one here because that's the one I used initially, and I think it will show the best contrast. So I click on it, download, and once again you can do this with any image with a transparent background. Download the original file. It asks me what I want to do with it. Do I want to save it or do I want to open it? Well, normally you can save it and open it with Gimp afterwards, but I'm just going to open with Gimp directly because I don't actually need the original file on my computer after this. It's asking me, I'm just going to open it with Gimp. I don't know why it asked me that again. So this will take a second to load up. I'm going to hit OK, and we have the image right here. Now, I'm going to expand this image a little bit. I'm going to add a border around this, so it being so close to the edges is not something that's good. So I'm going just to go to Image, Canvas Size, and lock those two together. And I'm going to increase it by, okay, just use the scroll wheel then. I'm going to increase it by 100, or no, I'm going to increase it by, yeah, 150%. Okay, and then I'm going to center it. Resize. This will give me some good distance to work with. Now, let's say, for example, you don't have all this fancy stuff here, which might happen. The things you're going to need to get is the toolbox, which you can just go to Tools, New Toolbox, and open up the toolbox, and this is your basic tools. Next, you'll need to make sure that you have a Layers tab open. You can do this by either hitting Control-L, which will bring up a Layers tab like this, or I do believe you can go to Windows, Dockable Dialogues, and then Layers. So that's the other thing we're going to need up. This is going to be very simple. All I'm going to do is make sure that I have this biohazard layer selected. And I'm going to go to Layer, Transparency, and Alpha Deselection. And what this will do it will highlight the edges of this image. It's a little bit hard to see right now, but you can see maybe that there's some dotted lines around here. Next, what I'm going to do, and this is the process of adding a border to the image to make it sort of pop out more. I'm going to go to Select and then Grow. And the amount that you want to grow it will depend on how thick of a border that you want. I'm going to just do 7 here and see how that looks. Okay, so that is too thick. You can see the thickness of the border right there. I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo, or you can also go to Edit and then Undo. I'm going to grow once again, this time maybe like 3. I want a kind of thin line for this first layer. I think maybe just slightly lower, so Control-Z once again, and then I'm going to go with 2. That should be a good size for me. Now, normally what a lot of people will do is they'll just take the paint bucket and they'll fill in that border there. But what happens is you get nasty looking stuff like this. You see how that there's sort of like transparent blocks there? The way I can make that very easy to see, and you don't have to do this, this is just to, for example here, create a new layer, move it underneath here, and paint bucket the background something really bright like this green color here. Hit Control A. So now you'll see that there's sort of like this nasty color bleeding around the edges there, which we don't want. So the way that I stop that from happening, you can play around with the paint bucket's threshold, but the way I stop this from happening is by creating a... So as I have that selected, create a new layer, hit OK, then take the color I want to use, which this situation is black, and just fill in that entire layer there. So it gives you a nice solid fill. Then I take that layer and I drag it down, or the other option is to hit this down button and move it below the first layer. So now you can see we don't actually have any transparent color bleeding through. We get a nice solid border. There's no like failure to partially fill areas or to have semi-transparent areas. So this is good. If you want at this point, you can already see a big difference with how it pops out with just that very thin line. If you want at this point, you can select your first layer and then merge it down, so that way they have become one solid image. I'm going to do grow once again. Now you can do this any way you want. You don't necessarily have to do this exact process, but I feel that adding a couple of different borders sort of helps enhance the visual aesthetics of the image. So I'm going to grow once again. Judging by before, I want this to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to try and go with 5. Ooh, that is definitely way too thick of a border. So maybe 3? Yeah, I think that should work good. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit new layer. I believe you can also just hit layer up here and then hit new layer too if you want to do that. This time I'm going to add a white border, so I'm just going to select white here, or you can just click this to reset it to defaults, and paint bucket that in, and once again drag it below. We already got a little bit more of a pop, but if you have an image like, let's say for example, I'm going to merge this down once again. If you have a background color that is really bright, let's say, I don't know, maybe a yellowish color, and you have just a white border here, oops, like a white border, then it's going to kind of look weird still. So in order to kind of counteract that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one final layer of black around the edges. So I just grew it by 2 once again, so you can see that I have this layer. Going to create a new layer here. Okay. And then I'm going to fill in that layer with black and drag it down. So now we have a nice, good outline that if we were to once again create a new layer, you don't have to do this, I'm just doing it as demonstration, and fill it in with yellow, that even with that yellow background we can see the image still kind of really pops. But one of our issues at this point is that the image still looks very flat. It looks like I just paint bucket fill in a bunch of areas. There's no real sort of oomph given to it. So the way to counteract that is I am going to create another new layer. I'm not going to grow anything this time. I'm going to keep it highlighted exactly the same. I'm now going to click on my paint bucket tool. This is Gimp version this is Gimp version 2.8.18, so it might be a little bit different, but in this version you double click on whatever tool you want and you can bring up additional options. That was actually paint bucket. So like for example the eraser, I can double click and it gives me the option of different brushes and stuff like that. For the paintbrush, or for the bucket fill though, I'm going to double click and open up this options dialog, which gives me a couple of different things like opacity and stuff like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to fill type and go down to pattern fill. And then I'm going to click on the pattern here, and you can click this magnifying glass to expand the pattern sizes. Now, you'll probably have nowhere near the amount of patterns that I do, because I actually have downloaded a few different pattern packs from online that give me a lot more pattern fills. But if you don't, hopefully you should be able to find something in here that you want to use. All I'm going to do at this point is scroll up and find a pattern that I think might look good with this this biohazard symbol. So I want it to kind of look a little bit maybe eroded, to kind of have like a look of being like a faded, eroded biohazard sign. So something that looks a little bit too strong for me. Something with veining to it. Actually, I think this might be good. So now that I have this new layer selected, I'm going to fill over the entire thing once again. But this time I'm not going to merge it down, because if I merged it down it would do nothing. We filled in the exact same layer. What I'm actually going to do is, first off, if the layer has any color, what you'll more than likely want to do is go up to the Colors tab here, go to Hue Saturation, and then just desaturate this entirely and hit OK, so it becomes black and white. Otherwise, if it were to have a color to it and you start merging it with the new layer, which would be this layer here, it will discolor, which you probably don't want. But now that we have this set to black and white, what you can do is you can go up to this Mode tab here and start selecting different modes and seeing how they affect the image. You might not see much right now, but I do believe there's a little bit of grain there. It's just very, very slight. Or the better way to do it is to hover your cursor over the Mode tab and use your scroll wheel, so that way you can sort of scroll on the fly. So you can see different overlays doing different things. Like right there, that is really nice if you wanted something to look sort of semi-tarnished or dirty. This one is really strong, but we can actually correct that. I'm going to continue looking through though and see if there's any other ones that catch my eye. So I think maybe the difference here might be a good one to go with. So I have the difference here overlaid. It gives us a nice sort of dirty symbol. Once again, this is what it looks like without any texture. This is what it looks like now that we added texture. Like I said, that I think adds a nice pop right then and there. But if the effect is a little bit too strong, you can go to the opacity here and you can sort of dial it up or down if you want. So let's say I want it to be maybe about, let's go with 60% here. And I can also experiment by going to brightness and contrast and adjusting the brightness of the image and the contrast, and seeing I might be able to extract more grain. I might be able to darken the whole thing if I wanted to. Like for example, if I go here and I, not like that. So like this right here looks very sort of cartoony. It has the almost looks like cell shading to it. So that might be a look that you're going for. I'm just going to go with this default look right here. I really like this look right now. It looks sort of worn, and it actually looks like sort of semi-realistic if you ask me. If you have the specific overlay that you like, you can now go to merge down and merge them together. I'm going to keep them separate for right now. With the actual complete image overlaid, like we have right now, we can now go to filters, light and shadow. And this is something that's very, very important if you ask me for making an image pop. We go to drop shadow here. And usually the default options are good. The default options would be usually 4, 4, and then 15 for the blur radius. I suggest disabling allow resizing. What that does is if your image is too close to the wall of the canvas and you try adding a drop shadow, it will actually expand the canvas automatically, which most of the time you do not want. If you're far enough away though, it shouldn't actually resize the image at all. But I'm now going to apply the drop shadow here. The opacity actually doesn't make much of a difference because automatically it's set to whatever opacity that you use in the options, so you can just adjust it manually afterwards like this. To sort of help see how this drop shadow helps the image, what I'm going to do is add another, once again not necessary, add another layer in the background here, and I'm going to color that layer white, which will give us a good contrast. So drop bucket, and then, oops, I'm still on pattern fill. I gotta go back to color fill. Drop bucket, move that all the way down. There we go. So, for example, before drop shadow, after drop shadow. I think it's sort of self-explanatory. And once again, you can play with the opacity here to, oh, not that opacity, the drop shadow's opacity, to get the effect that you want. So if you want a very slight shadow, you can reduce the opacity, or a very dark shadow, you can increase it, and that sort of, once again, gives the impression of depth and makes it look not so much like it's just something that you threw together really quickly. And that's what I mean. So before, this is the image after I just added the borders. This is the image with drop shadow, already looks a lot better. This is the image with texture, looks a lot better. Then you can combine the two together and really make something that pops out. At this point though, actually, instead of deleting that layer, I'll just hide the layer. At this point though, we pretty much have everything done that I would want to do with this specific icon. I think it looks very good. It was very quick to make. It was very easy. If I wasn't having to explain this, I could probably make something like this in 3 minutes. And like I said, that looks way better than the original image, which, if I bring it up here, was just this. So we went from this to this in a few minutes. Also, this has one extra added benefit, because if you go to your layer that the color's on, you select all, you can go to filters, or excuse me, colors, hue/saturation, and if you rotate the hue/saturation bar, you can actually change the symbol to whatever color that you want afterwards. So if you have something that a specific symbol color might work better for, in an image or something like that, you can just open up this image and rotate the hue and get that effect. For this, I can just go and save it, save as, and then whatever. I can just, this is what I do for most of my saves, and this is why I can never find anything. So now that we have this done, like I said, you can actually save the file, but if you want to quickly drag and drop it onto an image like my thumbnail here, what you're going to more than likely want to do is go to File, Export As, and then make sure the extension is PNG. You want to make sure the extension is PNG, because if it's not, if it's like JPG or something like that don't have transparency layers saved, then this transparent background here will be turned into a solid color, usually black or white. If you try and drop it onto an image, then it won't overlay properly. It'll just be like a solid white or black brick. But I'm going to save it as a PNG. I hit export. I already exported it once. Replace. And you can set your compression levels. The higher the compression, the smaller the file size. The lower the compression, the larger the file size. The thing is that the higher the compression, the lower the image quality will be. The lower the compression, the higher the image quality will be. So I'm going to save it like this, and certain things might give you the option to preserve transparency layers. I don't actually see it here, so I'm just going to hit export. So now that I've exported it, it looks like this. And by the way, that face popping up actually isn't something I'm messing with you in the video. That apparently is just a glitch. But it looks like it has a solid background, but in reality it actually doesn't. And the way I can prove this is if I take this right here and I'm gonna hide everything here, so it just looks like a solid image. What I can do is I can just take that file and drag it from my other monitor here and then just drop it right here on the image, and you can see that the transparency and everything has been preserved. So if I had an image like right here, for whatever reason that I wanted to add the icon to use as a thumbnail, I can now just drag and drop the image right onto here, and I can just select the scale tool, click on it, and then scale it. Now, one thing to know is that if you hold Control, it will scale uniformly. So I can just scale it down, hit Enter, and then I can just drag and drop it wherever. Now, of course, this isn't actually a thumbnail. The sort of aspect ratio would be way off for a thumbnail, but I'm just kind of showing you how you can literally just drag and drop it from another, from the actual image save, and then just add it to thumbnails if you wanted to, you know, make thumbnails with it or whatever. And you can do this with many different images with different icons, and then you can just have a whole sort of almost repertoire of icons that you can use for thumbnail manufacturing, or even just if you are a, you know, designer for pamphlets or anything else like that. You can just have these elements that you can quickly drag and drop right onto whatever you're creating, and sort of I don't know, it looks professional. It looks a lot more professional than, once again, this just being dragged and dropped on there. Which, if I were to do that, were to grab this and I were to drag and drop on there, it would look like that. I mean, that is not very professional, if you ask me. If I saw a pamphlet with somebody that used something like this instead of something like this, I would be very, very disappointed in their ability to make pamphlets. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it at least informational. I might do a couple other videos like this with quick tips, even though this wasn't too quick, sort of tips for making thumbnails, for creating text, audio, different stuff like that, because I have to deal with it all the time with my channel and making it, and at least hopefully the information I share can be beneficial to other individuals. I thank you guys very much for watching, and I actually personally will be using this probably on some of my pictures in the future, because some of my thumbnails in the future, because I think it actually turned out really nice. But personal opinion aside, thank you guys, and bye.